All right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Rest from Recovery podcast. With me, I have Josh Tarnofsky. Hopefully, I got that name right.
Nailed it.
Owner and operator of Yogathlete. And Josh, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah. As we were talking offline, explaining the Rest from Recovery, and for me, as an endurance athlete, recovery or active recovery is a big one, and yoga is only something I've dabbled in. So it'd be good to get, a little more depth behind the value of yoga as a recovery modality.
Sure, man. I appreciate that acknowledgement and, that consideration, because that's where a lot of Yogathlete came from, is the aspects of yoga that are so beneficial, but so many people don't get, because yoga can be something that's tough to approach.
Right.
Or it's kind of got this feeling that it's a lot heavier to get into than just let's go do this. And so what we wanted to do is start to show people the principles and the ideas that they can just take into what we call micro flows, or just even like 20 seconds in their day while they're standing out in the line at the grocery store or driving in their car. What can they be doing to really create that functionality and active recovery just throughout the day and then that lifestyle?
Yeah, I appreciate both of those things. One, we tend to think it has to be some kind of hour-long thing that you can do. I'll call it microdosing, or like you said, the microflows or something like that. But also, dispelling misperceptions that I candidly, even myself, had is, you hear yoga and you think of Zen and Buddha and the woo-woo element of it, and that there's anything good, better, and different, but that may not resonate with every person.
Yeah.
But there's significant value in the movement of it.
Yeah, you're so right on with that, Scott. And just to kind of take it even like a macro approach to what you said, yoga itself, at least in the West, the way a lot of people perceive yoga, is this movement practice, and it's a really physical body practice. And it's said that it was introduced that way to the West, like America, because people really weren't ready for the woo-woo stuff. So it was, ultimately yoga is not really about movement. Like, I don't know, how much you've studied the bigger picture of yoga, but yoga essentially is, a lifestyle, which is about connecting with a higher power energy. And ultimately that can look like meditation, breath work, and really just feeling inspired on a daily basis. And so, one of the pieces of yoga, they say there's 8 limbs to yoga, and they kind of show this circular model. So there's not really a hierarchy. You just kind of go through different areas wherever you're getting into it. And one of the pieces is the physical body. So, I think there's kind of this thing where a lot of people perceive it only as a movement practice, and other people perceive it as there's this super woo-woo thing that they can't even really understand, and they have to do this movement practice to get there. And it's really not about that. It's really about just wherever you are in your life, you find what fits with you and opens you up to feeling inspired and ready to go to that next level, whether it's recovery, whether it's your sport, whether it's weightlifting, being a parent, just whatever it is, you just, you tap in and you go.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me think of just like anything, it's interesting to know that there's 8 components or limbs. But, like a lot of things, whether it's a book we read or a class we take, you don't always have taking everything away from it or see value in it based on where it fits in your life, or not yet. It could be a not yet too. You're just not there in your athletic endeavors or whatever that might be.
Totally.
So when it comes to establishing, maybe what's the background on Yogathlete for you, and where that approach came from, and kind of merging those two words, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think for kind of a visual perspective of Yogathlete, one of my mentors always put it best. If you think of a circle, and on one side you've got yoga, the other side you've got strength training. And, most people, they tend to they start going towards yoga, the circle kind of goes this way, right? They start pulling towards the yoga energy and the flexibility and the mobility. Then you got people that are into strength training and they start going this way. But the idea is, if you can really find a way of being that allows you to kind of do both at the same time, then the circle starts to expand, right? And you get this larger circle of flexibility, mobility, strength, power, agility, speed, and just keeps building and building. And so ultimately, when you're in that space, you have all the tools to kind of move through your practices or your modalities or your sport in a way that is more holistic, more well-rounded. And you know, that whole entire philosophy really it started as a personal journey for me. And then as I was growing, I started to notice all these people were having these parallel experiences and not having the same knowledge and wisdom that, I was seeking at the same time. There's just this big gap in the fitness industry and in wellness. And so, I originally started out in the restaurant industry and did that for about 9 years, super successful with it. And about year 6, I put on 40 pounds of weight, started having crazy back pain, and I was only 28 at the time.
Okay.
And it was just crazy. I'm like, what in the world is going on? This is nuts, right? And I was going to all these practitioners and people to try to help with it. And they had no clue what was happening, and they were doing everything they could. Nothing was changing. And, I basically ended up just finding all these modalities and all these different ways. And a lot of it was through yoga, meditation, breath work, understanding neuromuscular connection and neuromuscular development. And just really starting to recognize that there was nothing wrong with my back. There was just these, some of it was the mind-body connection. Some of it was muscular imbalance that I developed over time. But it was even more kind of like, whoa, moment. And this is what we see across the board with almost everybody that comes into our experience, is that, high school sports and collegiate sports had really just messed me up. I've been playing soccer most of my life, and most of the people that come in either played football, soccer, some type of sport that was very predominant with one muscle group.
Yep.
And, the coaches were just forcing us into like doing weightlifting in a certain way that was kind of an all or nothing mentality. There was no mindfulness to it. You had, just running and not proper stretching. And the stretching we were doing was just basic stuff that didn't really work.
Right.
Which I'm sure you're so familiar with those things. It's like so much of what we're taught growing up by coaches, and, and bless them for wanting to be part of a community and wanting to serve kids and help them grow. But it was like just the wrong information. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so
or incomplete even.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And so long story short, we have people that come in with, slip discs when they're like 20 something years of age because they've been deadlifting and trying to squat heavy weight when it's not that they shouldn't have been doing that. There's just a better way to really build up to that, right? More that prehab concept, understanding how to set those foundations correctly. And so, we saw a lot of that, and then, just people being quad dominant, and then you start to introduce the sitting culture of work and school, and it just kept. So I'm like, boom, 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 and a lot of the influence from my yoga training and my yoga experience really started to free me, because I started to understand the mind-body connection and the mindfulness within movement. But then, I also kind of had this desire to be strength training and moving really, fast and intense, and not like just in an Ashtanga kind of way, which is a type of yoga where it's a little more intense of a flow.
Okay.
And is very kind of a regimen, but more of like, what you see, like, I don't know if you follow guys like Ido Portal.
No, not familiar with him.
Really cool work, man. Ido Portal is one of the big influences in my life. But there is people all around, and I'm in Southern California now. And so as I'm getting back into, strength training, I'm not finding that balance, right? And for some reason, I felt led to go to a kettlebells workshop. And I'm at this kettlebells workshop, and this guy that was teaching it, he was kind of this unique guy, a little bit ahead of the time as it was. And he was teaching a lot of these things about proprioception and neuromuscular development. And in the kettlebell workshop, it was a kettlebell certification. I couldn't pass the certification because on the snatch, I couldn't get my scapula, the muscles to fire properly to anchor the scapula and go overhead with the snatch.
Right.
And so everybody else is crushing it. I'm like, what's going on, right? And then I'd come into this thing with some low back pain, and we're swinging kettlebells for like 3 days straight, and my back never felt better. And some of the moves this guy was teaching us, that was more the stretching components, and the active recovery was just like lighting me up. Boom, boom. Like, this is amazing. And so, you just start to see all this come together, and you're like, yeah, this is incredible, And so from there, it really just kept evolving into a much bigger community. And that's what I like to talk about, is that we are a community more than we are a certain modality or a certain way. Our community is really big on neuromuscular development, bioenergetics, biomechanics, and that recovery piece. And when you start to kind of drill it down, we do focus on longevity. That's probably our biggest aspect, longevity, performance, and recovery. But what we really feel is, and what we believe, and I know so many people that can attest to this, is we want everybody in our community to be doing whatever they love athletically and just actively to 100 plus and doing it really well. And we really believe that's possible if you have the right wisdom and knowledge to be able to just move forward like that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that a lot, because I mean, I think that's where I am personally, and as I'm not getting any younger, but I don't want to lose that vitality. And so,
Gaining it, yeah.
Some of that too is even speaking to, as you mature and age, your athletic goals shift, or at least optimally they do.
That's cool.
Sometimes we think we're the glory days, but keeping longevity in mind, and then how to do that well, and what's going to enable that.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple perspectives on longevity. For me, longevity also is got an undertone of continuing to get better and better and better.
Right.
For some people, it's maintaining, and that's fine if that's what they want. But for me, it's better and better and better. And I really see this where there's 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds that are running circles around 20-year-olds, and it's still kind of looked at as like a phenomenon, but it's really going to be the norm moving forward. And it's just you keep hearing like 40 is the new 20, 50 is the new 20. It's going to keep getting better and better. And there will be some scientific aspects to that, but a lot of it's this bioenergetics piece and this mindset piece and the emotions behind a lot of that we're seeing. And that's a whole nother conversation when you start to look at the collective ego. But I always like to bring in the idea of like the 4-minute mile into that conversation.
Yes.
It's like everybody thought the 4-minute mile was impossible. One person does it, and now all those people are just like crushing the 4-minute mile, and kids are starting to do it. And it's just like, keep going and going, right?
Yeah, you're speaking my language as a runner, and it's funny. I just had that conversation this past week about, the mindset element of it, and I think historically when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute, 1 week later, 3 guys did it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
wow.
It was like within a week later, like all of a sudden, boom! Because then it was like the art of possible was there, and so I can appreciate that correlation.
Totally, man. I think that idea of permission goes a long way with people's mind and energy. And, it can get very woo-woo with that whole principle we're talking about, but it can also be very practical. And just this idea of permission, when people feel it, when I was 28 with back pain, I had 35-year, 40-year-old mentors that were just telling me all a bunch of like over the hill BS. And I'm like, it just didn't feel right to my soul.
Yeah.
And I just kept on searching and realized that they were just flat out wrong. They were just wrong. But it wasn't their fault. They didn't have the information, and they weren't hungry for it. Right. Yeah. They weren't seeking it.
Kind of good intentions misapplied. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, there's an entire culture that I kind of like just evolved from, so to speak, to where, that doesn't exist anymore in my realm. To me, I really believe 40 is the new 20, 60 is going to be the new 20, 70 is going to be the new 20. And I really think that's going to keep going and going. I know it will. And so for me, I'm just excited about what these possibilities are and how much greater we can all become when we really want to embody this knowledge we're talking about.
Yeah, I like that word permission, because I think the key element to that is community. You mentioned, totally. and community enables the permission, because sometimes we get locked in our own minds. A lot of the glass ceilings are created within ourselves. I know that's how I am, and I'm much of it. And you convince yourself not to, whatever that is. And then you just kind of stop where, if there's a level of community that you've got somebody to kind of bounce things off of, and then you just look at that incremental gain. I think sometimes we can get caught up on the Pinterest perfect ideal of what things look like, and
totally.
that chasm, when really it's just, where are you better than yesterday?
Exactly. That was what my biggest mentor's phrase was, better every day. And that always kind of stuck with me. I love, are you better than yesterday? Because, to me, that is like in your own lane. That's when you kind of take the whole competition thing out of it, and you become in competition with yourself to just be better every day versus like, am I good enough with this person or that person or Instagram or Pinterest? And it is kind of wild, because the more that I got, I would love to be able, as the yoga athlete community comes larger into the world, I'd love to be able to say, just do this and run with it. Here's your cookie cutter design. But,
Right.
When you bring too much dogma and too much science into this realm of movement and recovery and all this, a lot of times it causes people to freeze up. There's too many parameters to move within, and then you kind of don't get that expansive like creativity that comes with it. So, I think it's just important to find that balance in the community of what are some good parameters that are good foundation, and then what is that woo-woo that's going to drive people into like that creative state of I can go way above and beyond what anybody's shown yet, and be fully supported doing that.
Yeah.
And that's what we're big on.
So practically, how does that look on dispelling? We'll start with the dispelling of like misperceptions of things, and then how do you get there practically in the movements?
Like in specific movements, or just like your own personal, like maybe like an example.
Yeah, specific movements. So you had shown some methods or talked about the different methods that are out there. There's a continuum of yoga styles. Maybe let's talk to one and the value that derives.
Okay. Yeah. So, maybe like a certain style of yoga that is kind of a certain like rigidity or
certain methodology that would produce the benefit you're looking for relative to longevity.
Okay. Again, that's kind of what there might be another yogi that can answer that quickly, but for me, I really have to take a step back and look at it from the holistic realm, because with each style of yoga, you do have that area where you have to incorporate other stuff. And I think that's where a lot of the misinformation comes from, is it's a much bigger picture than this one style. But because, for example, I think a lot of people would answer you with this idea of Yin Yoga. I don't know if you've heard of that, where it's very relaxed. Like you get into a pose and you just hold it for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and it really opens you up. I mean, you'll see a couple of cool things on the energetic level. Energetics, like say somebody gets into a pigeon pose. Do you know what that is? Where so you're in a pigeon pose, you're in that, and you get really comfortable where you can hold it without feeling the strain, but you feel the stretch. You hold that for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, potentially. Sometimes it's 1 to 2, depending. And in that hold, people just melt. Their body releases, their nervous system releases, their muscles release, and they can just relax. And they start to find deeper levels of just relaxation and flexibility. And it's really cool. But at the same time, they're missing the active stretch component that creates that neuromuscular like connection and stability. Yeah. And so you can do too much Yin Yoga and just be Gumby, right? So then you're going to go back and do some other stuff to move it together. And so you really start to find that it's like too much stretching is not good. Too much active stretching doesn't get you as deep as you want sometimes. And I feel like the best combination I've seen so far is if you can really do what there's a style called Hatha Yoga. Okay. And Hatha Yoga really is kind of like, from what I've been taught, and this is different perspectives from everywhere's going to argue differently, but Hatha Yoga is really kind of like the bigger umbrella that a lot of these other yogas came from. You have like Ashtanga, Yin Yoga, these different styles. Hot Yoga came out of a lot of that. Okay. But Hatha is kind of the practice of like it's a certain style of asanas that really hold the integrity to the pose and the anatomy, and really make sure you're in alignment. Mm-hmm. And you're holding that pose in an active way that's letting things change the landscape of the mind-body connection, and really just getting in there at a deep level. But again, everybody's anatomy is different. So there's no real such thing as true alignment, right? Like we get into this asana pose, and asana is just the movement within yoga or a pose. And say you get into like a warrior one, everybody's going to look a little different. So you can't really say this is the right pose for everybody, or this is the right way to do it. And I think that's where it gets deceiving, is like, if you can think more along the lines of combining passive relaxation stretching that lets the nervous system relax, which is a lot of Yin Yoga, and then start to bring in the active component as well, and kind of hybridize those. Sure. I think that's the most powerful way to go when we're talking just yoga. Okay.
Yeah, it does. It made me think of a few other things where it's like, understanding the context of the different styles and how they should be used, kind of like using a tool, right?
Yeah.
There's different types of hammers, but you're
Yep.
not going to use, a sledgehammer and a ball peen hammer in the same manner. So
exactly.
they're achieving different methods and results. And
Totally.
kind of like you're saying, like the yin is like, okay, if you need to really relax, get your nervous system kind of chilled out, that's the method to go and de-stress.
Yep.
But if you're somebody who's like maybe lacks strength and stability, there might be another method that you want to get that core thing. Or like you were saying, blend the two. Like, okay, a good warm-up method might be yin.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then maybe if you're looking for a workout, a mobility workout, there's a different approach. Because that was my introductory gym, was the kind of the sweat yoga, the hot yoga. Right. And that was like a workout. Like my core was working hard, plus, all the sweating going on.
Yeah. That's gnarly, man. And if you get like some traditional yogis watching this, they might say, well, each lineage or whatever their most, favorite lineage is, it incorporates everything that I just said. So, it might not be relevant to somebody who's a purist or traditionalist, but if you look at it from a newbie coming in, it really is like, there are different tools and there's going to be different benefits, different outcomes. And I think you're so right, man. It's like finding those pieces that really like activate you for what you need at that moment is more true to the idea of yoga, which is your own personal journey, right? Like you just need to find what works for you and go for it. And kind of like micro and niching back into the conversation of, what is the best modality or what works the best. When I was in that kettlebell certification course, what they were teaching me was these active recovery stretches that were actually some yoga stretches, but they were not in a flow sequence. I just got into it, did it a few times to actually relax the mind and let the muscles relax.
Okay.
And it was kind of passive with a slight bit of active. And then they always recommended get up and do some body squats to get that compound muscle group moving and kind of lock in the new ranges of motion you were creating.
Okay.
And so that was really that moment where I had that micro flow moment. I was like, oh, I don't have to spend 30 minutes in a yoga class to get to this pose. You know what I'm saying? It was like, I realized a lot of yoga that I was experiencing, and I guess yoga asana is the best way to say it, wasn't really, it was like there was too much stuff in the way to get what I really needed, because it was confusing me. So if I could just get what I really needed in that moment and then make sure it stayed activated and really dialed in, then from there, it was easy just to go to the class and not have this one thing of other things I personally needed in the yoga class, So I know that's kind of a long-winded way of saying it, but there isn't really one real modality. And if anybody's preaching, there's only one way to do this, most likely they're just trying to get people into their following, so to speak.
Yeah.
They're trying to get people into their community versus hey, just find your path. What inspires you? Here's some parameters you can work with, but put them together how you want to.
Yeah. And, like you said, I think it kind of boils down to the need at the time. And it kind of rolls back to kind of self-awareness, I guess, where kind of, again, the woo-woo, but that's really what we're talking about, is understanding your body and the need at the time. And these various modalities within the context of yoga can help kind of be that kind of temporary fix or pressure point to help whatever circumstances may be a little off.
Yeah, it really is. When you understand the different tools, you can bring them in as you need them, and you can really just find the relief and the alleviation. And that's a really good way to look at it. And in those same principles and tools that can provide that relief in the moment or in that season of life are the same principles and tools that can be used to go be more expansive and go far beyond where you are in the moment. And I think that's where again, we talk about the mindset piece, is how do people activate those tools? How do they use them? Because we have a workshop later today where we're going to be teaching people how to do a certain move with their core, and it has a lot to do with jaw tension. So it's this metaphysical, energetic experience, and it's really going to be designed to help people heal and just move through a lot of back pain but it's ultimately designed to teach you how to be stronger instantly in your core in whatever you're doing, whatever sport, whatever like weightlifting scenario you're in. And so it's more like a life hack that can be used either way, right? And so, when people get too hung up on prevention and prehab and that recovery piece, then sometimes they forget, oh yeah, I can also go just supersede whatever I've done in the past. But then some people get so gung ho about like just try and they get too competitive. So it is finding that sweet balance between the recovery and then how can I be that 4-minute mile and keep just driving and driving.
Yeah, and just seeing that application of where it can be tweaked, and even like you were saying on the micro focus, like I think we were talking offline. I don't think we were recorded just yet, but where you can take a couple of minutes to do something that you need in that moment rather than waiting for the class or a particular time and having it time blocked. You can be sitting, we're sitting at desks all day, many of us.
Yeah.
So how do I tweak that? So is there like a specific approach to that where, I'm sitting static all day in a not optimal position for strength and wellness? Mm-hmm. How do we kind of navigate that?
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And that's what we tend to focus on a lot in the Yogathlete community, is how do you integrate all this into your daily lifestyle? And I'll throw out a quick idea real quick. There's a study, and I don't have it to cite it, but I'll get it to you later if you need it. But it was a study about these maids at a hotel room or a hotel. And half of the group of maids were told that the work that they were doing on a daily basis was actually going to make them healthier and stronger and they'll lose some weight. The other half were told they had to go work out outside of whatever they were doing daily at their job. And so ultimately what happened is the group that was told that the work they were doing would help them lose weight and it would benefit them greater, they got results that showed that they were actually doing physical fitness, so to speak, and like getting like basically gains from like a workout and losing weight and getting stronger from just their daily job tasks.
Really?
Yeah. And a lot of it was just up here, that permission to like not feel like you had to go work out for an hour every day.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an actual study. I can't remember how many people they use. It's like 100 or 200, but I'll send it to you later on. But the whole thing is like, how do we integrate and be okay with how we're moving throughout our day? Because, really most of us have the time and we have the space to move throughout our day in a way that just lets us be super functional and really dialed in. But we're kind of taught, growing up, like sit in the chair, get your work done. And then when you have time and you're done, go play and go do your recess. Right. So for me, the biggest thing is first of all, is integrating that mindset of play. How can I bring play into my day? And that might look on a practical level of, when you get up from your desk, do some walking lunges to the water cooler, or go get a cup of water out of the cup of sink or whatever, right? And it's how can you start to do these things that really allow you to have more fun and functionality. Maybe you have a ball that you keep at your desk and you throw it against the wall and you catch it with, you throw it with your hand. And like one thing that I learned early on is you can take a tennis ball and you can write on it different letters, and then you can throw it and try to read the letters as the ball comes back to you.
Okay.
And so that's really good for proprioception and just like dialing in that energetic piece that you don't really see, but it energizes your body. It's like a play aspect.
Cool.
Right? Yeah, it's a great way just to kind of take a break. You're just sitting there and reading like P, L, X. And so it's things like that. And I think the more that you have tools like that to just get up from your desk and start to play and start to move, or, if you even find yourself like at the grocery store doing it, or standing in line, you can start to do these things that we're talking about now, is like these little neuromuscular development movements. And so what I really subscribe to is kind of coming back to this idea that there's probably 4 main movement patterns, actually 5 really, when you look at it. If you go into like an ASM through a fitness realm, or even people that are moving through yoga, I always like to look at like the hip hinge, which is kind of a deadlift motion or a toe touch. You got the body squat, which a body squat to me is like, yes, you can do it where you just kind of squat down to your knees are bent 90 degrees, but everybody should be able to squat down with their butt to the ground.
Right.
like that, everybody should be able to get into a full squat. Not everybody's going to achieve that because they don't want that or they have other things going on, but that's an area of focus. Really like pushing, pushing motion, which is pushing here or pushing here. So pushing forward or overhead. Also, you've got pulling, which is from overhead or in front of you. So pulling motion. And then we got twisting, like and then the lateral movement, right? So if you kind of start to look at those 5 areas of movement, then you can start to say, well, what are some movements I can do within those things that will open up my body, that will prime my mindset and my nervous system? And we talk a lot about that because I can actually show you if you want to. I roll my mat out just in case we got into some movement stuff. I could give you a quick, like 20-second movement pattern.
Yeah,
if that would help.
Sure. Yeah,
I know some people are visual.
Yeah, so, that's how I learn the best.
So one of the things that I love is it's coming into quadruped position. And right now, this is a pretty safe position for most people. You could put like a towel under your knees. You could put a towel under your wrist if you can't flex your wrist all the way. So the wrists kind of stay up a little bit like that. So you're in this position, and just talking about like a hip hinge, for example, you can kind of simulate the hip hinge by bringing your foot just out to the outside of your hand. And in this position, you'll notice a lot of stretching here in the hamstring, the glute, get some of the inner thigh and the low back. And so one of my favorite moves is to drop my knee out here and just kind of hang out here for a minute. And you'll start to feel a different stretch as you do that. And then you can bring the knee back in. And moving this knee in and out really starts to activate the neuromuscular patterning, the mind-body connection, the mind-nerve connection that a lot of people are not thinking about and using when they're sitting.
Yeah.
And so from here, you come back, you can get into a child's pose. You can come into like a runner's lunge and do a twist. And so there's a lot of things you can do just from that position. And so when we're in that kind of micro flow, I mean, we can turn that into 5 minutes like that.
Yeah.
Do a couple of those movements and then we're done. And our brain's going to be fresh. We're going to be excited to get back into work. And if we did that, say 5 or 6 times a day with different kinds of movements, that really does add up really quickly. And that's the biggest thing, is doing those movements. And like I said, making sure you're activating those muscles. So if you're stretching your glutes and you're moving through, try to squeeze your butt a little bit, or if you're like moving your arms overhead, try to activate your shoulders and pull your shoulder blades down your back and raise them up, and just use the other mechanisms that can help move things around.
Yeah, that last part's a good one too for functional and pain management. Is, again, we're sitting so much, we drive a lot. You get that hunchback. Now we got cell phones. You get that curled back, and it's the opposite direction. So like working that, pinching the blades back.
Yeah,
I've been working on that a lot lately and found a lot less back pain.
That's amazing. Yes.
Well. And then same with the hips as a runner, and then sitting all the time. We were talking about it early on, that imbalance of the posterior chain piece. And then I think about the term longevity. That's like a key. The posterior chain is key. As you see people get older and into the elder years, they can't get up out of things, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that starts the gentrification process. So if think about it from a longevity, is like this little 3 to 5 minute thing is setting you up at 75 to still be vibrant. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's incredible. It's like popping a little vitamin, for the physical body. It's wild.
Yeah. And I appreciate you pointing that out too, on the micro adjustments on a couple things. Well, one, the simplicity of it. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is that it can be 5 minutes, and that still equals success.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. I can show you all some before and after pictures. I only work out like once or twice a week. If I even call it a workout, I do a lot of like what we call play, which is just moving the whole body and just flowing around. Right. And periods when I just don't work out at all, but I use these micro flows, and I do things like, you could do really slow push-ups and just do like a 10 count and then hold it at the bottom. Right. Or you could do a pull up, or use like a TRX band and pull yourself and just hold it there and just feel that deep activation. Those are called eccentrics in, the weightlifting world. where essentially, or isometric, sorry, where you're just like holding something and squeezing it under load. But you can translate that to these 5-minute flows or whatever your goals are, what's flexibility, strength. And you'll start to see that 5 minutes really does just create a win. And when you do that a couple times throughout the day, it compounds and compounds and builds better. And I think the more people have permission to do that and know that it's not just about going and spending an hour or 45 minutes or 30 minutes at the gym once a day, they'll start to realize there's so much more freedom in the time that they have already.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I only work out like maybe 2 days a week. If I really want to hit some new goals or I'm trying to build a new skill, I'll go 4 to 5 days, like on that kind of like focus, just lifestyle. Like if I'm working on like a muscle up or a front lever or handstand, something kind of intense. But if it's just like keeping natural muscle up and flexibility and just feeling really good, yeah, I mean, 1 or 2 days a week, even on like the harder stuff, I can go for. But then it's like 5 minutes here, a minute there, 10 minutes here when I'm playing with my kid.
Right.
And just finding ways to move and play. And it really is incredible. And, I think one of my really good friends, his name's Modern Tarzan, is his handle on Instagram.
Okay.
He's a Ninja Warrior. I don't know if you ever watched that Ninja Warrior show.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I know a good handful of those guys. None of them really work out. They just go and play.
Yeah.
That's their thing. They play. And they're beasts. So when you start to really look at what people are doing at a higher level, this idea of going to the gym for an hour a day and, driving there and then driving back and then having to fuel up a certain way, it's, it does have its time and place.
Sure.
But I think for most people, what they want is just this idea of integrating play and these like micro flows and these micro movements and understanding that what they're doing can be enough if they really just get out of their chair and move and just have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the flow piece because you can just think of your day flowing rather than like these hard siloed moments. So
I love it, man.
We are creeping up on time, but I appreciate where you're coming from. And to me, it's encouraging, and hopefully the listeners are too encouraged on, the little things that you can do that have that compounding interest over time. Or a lot of times I'll say that pennies add up to dollars.
There you go. I love that, man. That's great.
So a couple things. What's one key takeaway that you would say to those listening for their next best action? Like they stop listening, what should they go do? Or what can they do?
I love that. I think, on a very easy to just jump into this next lifestyle level is really start to understand what your goals are. Like stop and think about what do you want your goals to be, and then start to kind of shift that paradigm from you don't need to go spend an hour every single day doing something or super focus on it, but really break out to this idea of how can I do something every hour of the day that just compounds up, like you said, that pennies to dollars mentality, and start really thinking about that for whatever those goals are. Because I think that can start to reduce a lot of that anxiety people have and a lot of that like over focus, so if it is just for you, like you mentioned off camera, we were talking about using a mobility ball or like lacrosse ball on your hips. For you, if it's, say that's an area you want to focus on and just breaking up some of that tension in the hips and you want to really just condition that body better and use that lacrosse ball, a lot of people will make that into a 30-minute thing they got to do every day. But maybe break that idea of like rolling out the lacrosse ball or a foam roller or whatever you use into little segments and think about how could I do that when I take a quick break here? How could I do that? And maybe set reminders on the phone to do that.
Yeah.
And so start to practice with that. So whether it's like, I want to improve my push-ups, or whether it's, I want to, feel less back pain, or maybe I have plantar fasciitis from running. They use a lacrosse ball on their foot. Like start to think, how can I service those things a few times a day? And really make the application something that is not just wait till I'm done with all my work to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's a good starting place. And then on top of that, I would just really get into, I think a lot of people don't know the term mobility. I don't know if you all speak that term a lot in this community.
Yeah.
But I would say start to find people that teach mobility movements. You can just Google that word and look at the searches on like Instagram, or I don't know if you have any resources in your community specifically, but mobility type movements, and just take from those what feel good and just do those a couple times throughout the day whenever you're scheduling these little movements. Things that apply to like opening up the low back or opening up the shoulders, and just do that. And I guess what I'm really saying is set reminders on your phone to do this every hour or so in the beginning, so you train your mind to just be on it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Kind of that as you go mentality, right?
Yeah.
I appreciate that. No, that's great. So I like to close things out with a couple personal questions, nothing too heavy, but what are you reading right now?
I'm not reading anything at the moment, but
Okay.
we're in the middle of a move, and the autobiography of a yogi just surfaced. That's one of my favorite people, Paramahansa Yogananda.
Okay.
So that book just kind of surfaced. I'm probably going to start reading that soon.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So what are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
I've been really into, musically, Trevor Hall is a big one. Love that. And then there's a band called Mauve, Mauve, that I listen to quite a bit.
Okay, cool. Check those out. All right. What is your favorite rest and recovery method?
Man, Yogathlete stuff, rest recovery. That's a good question, man. I think honestly, it would probably be polar plunging.
Polar plunging. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't even get into that today, but that's a big thing we love in the Yogathlete community.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an area I've done, but not habitually. And
gotcha.
I keep reading about it and the values of it.
It's huge, man.
I've got a definite glass ceiling on that topic right now.
Well, yeah, it's all good. We'll break you through that as well. It's one of those things, once you do it enough, it just becomes like second nature.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of value in doing that, but.
Well, there's also like with yoga, there's a lot of barriers to entry for a lot of people. And I think, again, we'll just distill it down to super easy steps. And then it's much more approachable than what the promotion of it in the social media portrays.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it does look like it could be a cool experience, especially when it's like people getting together in groups and whatnot. So.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So
it's just, I guess, not to take away the magic of it, but the ice bath, is with ice in the water is great, but it's said that you will get the same benefit just taking a cold shower in your shower.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of people are like, see the ice tub and they're like, there's no freaking way I'm going near that thing, and then, but that is magical too. When you have all those people chanting for you and you're just in it and it's like a minute passes and you're like, how in the world has it only been a minute?
Yeah.
It's pretty gnarly.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, Josh, thank you so much. How can folks find more about Yogathlete?
So we have an Instagram going pretty strong right now. So you definitely follow us there. We also, I think the best way is to get on our email list right now, which is going to be yogathlete.team@gmail.com. And you can just send us an email. We'll set you up. Or I don't know if you have a good way for them to jump onto a link, Scott, later on. We can post that.
Yeah, we can put that in the show notes.
Cool. That'd be amazing. And I think at the end of the day, start there. You'll see some of the stuff we're doing and some of the micro flows we're dropping, some of the movement stuff. And then, from there, you'll see what our bigger things are that we're launching in the next couple months.
Awesome. We'll look forward to seeing where things go and participating. Lord knows I can do some more mobility.
Hey, you know what? It's a good thing for everybody to be doing every day, as we talked about.
Yep. All right. Thanks.
Right on, man. Thank you. Glad to